Harley Earl was probably the most influential man in American automobile design.
A lot of people share the spotlight, but don't kid yourself. Bill Mitchell was the driving force.
Everybody will light up when you say Zora is done talking.
With racing, time is measured in fractions of a second and checkered flags. If you dominate that sport, however, they name eras after you. Say the words McDonald, DiLorenzo, Morrison, or O'Connell, and images of their Corvettes will streak through the memories of true race fans. One such era belonged to John Greenwood and his brother Burt, our first inductees into the 2018 Corvette Hall of Fame. The Greenwood legend opens in the perfect place for a racing story to begin, Motor City. Growing up in the Detroit area, their father, Hank, would occasionally take the boys to work with him at the GM Tech Center.
Dad was a civil engineer from Purdue. He was at a high position with the construction of the Tech Center. When the dome was finished, we'd always go, and all those famous cars you see, they just had them underneath tarps and stuff. They'd pull the tarps off for us. Cars were just bred right into us.
From an early age, John began taking things apart just to figure out how they worked. He was an engineer by nature, discovering a gift for making cars go faster both from under the hood and behind the wheel. This would eventually lead him to the legendary birthplace of racers, Woodward Avenue. Woodward Avenue was the epicenter of Detroit's social life back in the 50s and 60s. As the first paved road in America, legend has it that the first speeding ticket was written on it too. It's most fitting that John would learn to race on it as well.
He started on Woodward Avenue. He was making a race car and didn't know it. He was working, trying to find brake pads that would stop better so he could get away from the cops. Coming south on Woodward, you come over a rise and there's a right-hand turn right there. If you can slow down fast enough and make it and kill all your lights on the dash, then chase is over. That's what the point was, is make it happen and it's over. And the police were all his friends.
With a little help from John's wife, Burt would eventually convince John to go to Waterford Hills Road Course Driving School. From there, John became a force to be reckoned with wherever he took the wheel.
I was certainly reading about Corvettes all the time with Competition Press and Auto Week. So it was fun, and at 69, 70, 71, right in there. And that's kind of when I think we were reading about the Greenwoods a lot. And I think John had won one of his first A production championships right in that same period of time, defeating Owens Corning after they'd won 22 or 23 nationals in a row. Nobody beat these guys. They were great guys, great drivers. They did everything right. You know, when you get the right driver in the right car with the right backing and the right amount of testing, they're pretty invincible. And Owens Corning was invincible. So what John did, all the guys from Owens Corning were based in Central Division SCCA, as was John and Burt. John made a point of not racing in Central Division that first year so that they never raced against him. So they never saw John Greenwood race and never had a chance to race against him until they were at the runoffs at Road Atlanta. So when they had their final face-off, John was ready. He was ready to go. And he beat him. And I think he beat him again the next year. And I remember reading about it, and I thought that was so cool, the way he painted the car, the color of the flag. I was working at Chevrolet, and we were doing advertising campaigns about hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet. Things like that were very pertinent at the time. So it was a really, really neat time for Corvettes.
For the Greenwoods, every race, every contact made, and every turn of the wrench provided knowledge to make them faster.
I think John was a very good driver, very good. You know, we didn't have all of the data acquisition, etc., so the driver had to come through with all of that information.
Burt was a good driver too. I think Burt was a tremendous detail man. I think he put a lot of effort into the detail of the car before it went to the track.
And frankly, John was just a natural when it came to engineering, design, etc. Some people have that talent, some people don't. Some people, I know PhDs that don't have that talent.
Well, John did a lot of engineering at the track. We used to try and stop him from engineering the cars at the track because no matter how fast we would be going, whether the cars were qualified 1 and 2 on the front row or 1-3 or whatever it happened to be, as soon as the car was in from the next session, he's tearing it apart again. And I said to him at one point, leave it alone. You're on the pole. What are you doing? I mean, all you can possibly do now is mess something up and make it go slower. He says, no, we got to push forward with this thing. I think there's something else we should try here.
As they won, men like Zora Arkus-Duntov, Gib Hufstetter, and other Chevrolet engineers took notice and began to help in the race effort.
We could see him getting strong as a Corvette supporter and builder and racer. You know, Zora really liked John because of his dedication to Corvettes. You know, Zora fell in love with anybody that was gung-ho for Corvettes, and those of us that were supporting Zora, we did our best to make sure that we were doing the right thing for John or others, privateers and so forth. Of course, Zora would try to coach him on things, what Zora believed in, but maybe John didn't believe in that himself. So John would be beyond us many times because he was on the track much more than we could afford at our time. We only had one car, one test engineer.
From that point forward, things happened pretty fast. And '71 was one of our most successful years. We were very competitive at the 24-hour and went to Sebring with Dick Smothers co-driving with John, and they won the GT class, and it was a popular win. Then came a race at Michigan International Speedway that B.F. Goodrich did as a promotion, gave them all B.F. Goodrich street tires, and it was a 6-hour race to show the endurance factor to their tires. 2 weeks later, we had a contract with B.F. Goodrich for the international races to go to Le Mans in '72 and '3. There was a lot of people that questioned whether these are real street tires or not, and John was going through the kink at 210 miles an hour on street tires, flat. We won multiple races that year. At the end of '73, he was anxious to get back on race tires, painted the car black, went out and won every race he was in. That allowed Chevrolet to claim the manufacturer title for 1973 Trans Am.
This would eventually lead to the development of what would be called the Greenwood widebody.
John was studying how he could get more tire on the road and get the car wider and so forth, and he projected to build a broader car.
We had the original bodywork we did in the Corvette studio under Jerry Palmer and Duntov. Duntov came over and did some hand waving, and we did the clay modeling.
Chuck Jordan saw the project in the studio in Chevy 3, and what's that doing here? Well, take it to the basement. So they took it to the basement, and that's where it was completed.
With names like the Spirit of Sebring and the Spirit of Le Mans, these cars became an indelible symbol of Corvette's heritage.
Well, a long, long time ago, when I was a young guy, my father took my brother and I to the racetrack. We would go to the 12 hours of Sebring and the 24 hours of Daytona. And when the wide-body cars came into being in the mid-'70s in '75, '6, and '7, they were just amazing. And the sound of the cars roaring by was extraordinarily impressive. It left a long lifetime impression.
This was the most fun car. It entered the banking at 221 miles an hour without ever lifting. Then it dripped through the banking for every single lap for 250 miles.
I remember John coaching me at Sebring. He goes, you know how the hairpin is really, really slow? It's like first gear. I go, yeah, it's really slow. He goes, well, really, you shouldn't really go through it in first gear. It's because there's so much power. You could really break things on the car if you were accelerated hard in first gear with the qualifying motor. Of course, coming down into the hairpin, cruising up behind a Porsche, of course getting ready to pass him. And so obviously I slip it into first gear, doing exactly what John tells me not to do. And I nail it. And the car just sits there. And the wheels are just spinning like mad. And so I had it at about 6,000 in first gear, going probably 5 miles an hour because the tires were just smoking. And then I jammed it into second gear, and it was like the scene in Star Wars where they hit the accelerator and everything gets blurry in front. I had to do everything I could not to plow into the Porsches ahead of me because the car was so fast. It was like being launched out of a rocket ship.
These wide bodies were just heads and tails better than everybody else's cars, faster. And they were just awesome at Daytona before they ever put the chicanes in, because the cars go into the banking at 221 and they were still accelerating all the way around the start-finish line. And Zora, again, in the winner's circle, he's done that before in the Trans Am race. Yeah, he's a good guy.
America's sports car looked the part too, proudly wearing the colors of the flag on racetracks and covers of magazines all over the world.
We decided with all the exposure we were getting, we needed to get into some street product. We started with the GT cars. What we are about is total car development. We do the chassis, the drive lines, the bodies, the aerodynamic, and have from the start, even from the street racing days.
About this time, Zora was on his way out, and management had another vision for the future of GM and the performance market. This didn't keep the Greenwoods from racing, however.
But I remember qualifying for that Sebring race. Peter Gregg was down there, and Peter and John were great friends. So John was working on getting the pole, and Peter was working on getting the pole. And Peter and BMW team was pitted right next to us. And the track record, I believe, was a 2.55 to cover the 5.2 miles. So Peter goes out, and right away he runs like a 2:55. And he pulls the BMW in, and he says to John, he says, I'm at the track record right now. John's just buckling his helmet up. I think John's first lap was a 55. Then I think John's second lap was a 54. And then his next lap was a 53, and then he pulled in. Peter's mad now, so he's buckling his helmet on. He slams his helmet on, tears out in the BMW, and Peter's first lap is like a 54, and then he runs a 53, and then he squeaks out a 52 something, and the whole time we're looking over at John, and he's just buckling up his helmet. Peter comes in, convinced he's got the pole nailed down. John's there, he pulls out, and I believe his first lap was a 51. And we were just absolutely going crazy. It was so exciting. I get emotional even talking about it now, but it was so terrific. Peter goes out. John came right in right away. Peter goes out, he runs like a 53, 52. He gets into the 51s, but then he gets stuck, and he's running like 51.5, 51.8, 51.1, 51.7, 51, then he comes in. And so he's still got John by maybe a little tenth or something like that. So I think John's next outlap was a 49. It was awesome. And he ran a 49, a 48. And then Peter just was done. He took his helmet and fired it into the car and walked away from the car. John came in with a big smile on his face, and he goes, a lot more left. It was just great.
John would pass away on July 7, 2015, with no hard feelings or regrets. Throughout his life, he was a man of faith who kept his eyes focused on the road ahead and not in the rearview mirror.
When I look back on the racing and our involvement with the Corvette, it was clear that John was captured by the chase of perfection, of trying to get to a point that nobody had gotten before with everything he worked on. He was never looking for adoration as a driver. He wanted to be known as a builder, a constructor of the most competitive equipment. This isn't about me. This is about my brother. I want this all to be, this is my brother. It's his accomplishment, his brilliance, his drive that people associate with the Greenwood cars. I've been at his side throughout it, and I'm honored to be with him, as I always have been. I just looked up to him. He's my hero.
For their contributions in racing, developing, testing, and promoting America's star-spangled sports car, we proudly welcome John and Burt Greenwood into the Corvette Hall of Fame.